Hi, Professor Mitchell, or is it okay to call you Tom?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. I'm Tuoya. I'm a graduate student of English literature at Peking University. So, it's a delight to meet you on campus. And perhaps you can introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay, I'm Tom Mitchell, also known as WJT Mitchell. I'm a professor from University of Chicago in the United States, and I'm here giving lectures at Peking University in the beautiful month of April.
I feel like most of us know you as a professor, but you are also a father and many more. So how are you like as a person? I'm sorry.
How am I like as a person? An impossible question to answer. I am, I think, a generally happy person, especially right now. But I can be very unhappy sometimes. Um, I am telling everybody that I'm happy right now to be in a normal country
Okay.
because my country is not normal at the moment. Uh, it always, every country has some abnormality. There's some element of disorder or crazy behavior, self-destructive behavior. But right now, the United States is going through a very dark time with a very, very bad president who was elected by a majority of my fellow Americans. And that's what really disturbs me most, is that he won the election fair and square. You can't say the American people didn't want him. A lot of them did, and I think they're going to regret it very deeply. So that makes me unhappy.
Are you happy now?
Am I happy now?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Like I said, because I'm here in a normal country and I'm talking to my good friend, Tuoya Wulan, who is a very smart student at Peking University and has is also an artist and has made beautiful images to promote my lectures here.
Yeah, the way we get to know each other is that I designed, I think, like 7 posters in all for 2 of your lecture series in the School of Arts. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. And this is not your first time in China, right?
No, I've been in China many times. And I've lost count, in fact. I've been here in every decade since the 1980s, 2 or 3 times. So maybe 20, 30 times in China.
Has the impression changed?
Oh, the first time I was in China feels like it was a century ago because the country was completely different. Technologically, it was very backward. There were no automobiles. Everybody rode bicycles. I was given a bicycle by Beijing Foreign Studies University, where I was teaching, and so I joined the river of bicycles that was flowing everywhere. It was such fun to be part of this. Feel like you were in a river. It made the effort of bicycling feel nothing. You couldn't go fast. Some people tried, but most people just flowed like a beautiful stream of people. And so I fell in love then with China. I thought, this is, there are so many people, many more people. But at that time, 1988, they were living together peacefully. There was a little unrest. The students were very energetic. So that was my first impression. And then I came back other times. Now China is a completely different country.
What do you mean?
Now it's no longer backward technologically. It's in the avant-garde. When I went back after my visit last year, I said to everybody, I've been to the future.
Yeah. Is it a good future?
Mostly. It was mixed. Nothing is ever perfect. I mean, one thing that was made me feel concerned was when we took the great bullet train from Beijing to Shanghai. The train was fantastic. You hardly felt it moving, and it's flying through the landscape, 150 miles an hour. Never gone so fast in a train. But then around halfway between Beijing and Shanghai, we passed these empty cities with high rises, skyscrapers, 30, 40 stories high, clusters of them for new towns which may never be inhabited. And I know that's been a financial disaster for China, because they wanted to create new towns and new cities. They wanted to have housing for everyone. But at the same time, the population is dropping.
Yeah.
They didn't calculate on that. And people put money into it that they lost completely. These buildings may never be finished. So when I looked at that, I thought, this is a country that's trying to do good things, but sometimes it fails.
Because I'm born in 2000, like I'm a millennial. Many of my generation, many of my peers, they refuse to get married, and we call ourselves the last generation.
I know, you told me that last year.
Yeah.
I was very struck by it because it made me sad to hear you say that. I don't want you to be the last generation.
Who knows? Maybe we can talk a little bit about your book, Mental Traveler.
Okay.
I am the translator of this book, so and I want more people to know about the writing process, the inspiration, and the impact of the book on your life. So could you maybe tell us a little bit how you've thought about writing about this book?
Well, I never thought I would write this book. I'm a scholar. I write books of art history, literary study, and especially critical theory in the arts. I study images across the arts. So I call myself an iconologist. But my only son, who I love dearly, suffered from mental illness. It was diagnosed as schizophrenia. Maybe that was accurate, maybe not. In any case, it made him very depressed, although at other times he could be very wonderful and enthusiastic. He was an artist, a poet, a painter, a sculptor, and most of all, a filmmaker. And he made several films, and we felt that he was on his way to having a real career. But without much warning, one day in June of 2012, he jumped off of the balcony of his apartment, 59 stories above the street. And it was a complete shock to me. But the way I deal with shock and pain is to write. That's my instinct. So I immediately wrote something on the day, and I revised it several times. I showed it to my friends. We had next door neighbors at the time who were very, very close to us and to my son, Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn, who are famous people actually, because they were leaders of the radical underground in the 1960s, the anti-war movement against the Vietnam War. So they knew Gabriel very well. They were like second parents to him. And so we were all intensely together in mourning for a week. And Bill read the first draft of what I wrote. He's a very good writer himself. He's much more a political writer and a journalist, not so much a scholar. He writes a new book every year. So he read what I wrote and he said, this is not what you want to say, which is what a real friend can do when they tell you the truth. You've written something, and he said, you're apologizing for writing about your son as if, maybe he's not important enough to deserve writing. He says, get over that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, he's more important than anything in the world. And you must not be afraid of affirming that. So it was like throwing cold water in my face. Mm-hmm. At first I was shocked. I thought, oh, this is terrible. I've failed again. But he's also a very encouraging person. So I rewrote it overnight, and then it was published in the Chicago Tribune. It got a lot of response. And then almost immediately I said, I have to write the story of Gabriel's life, mm-hmm. and of his, not just his illness, but because the illness was, it was damaging to his life, but he had so much more than that. And I wanted to tell the story of his artwork and of his personality as a human being who had a great impact on many people. So I sat down to write that. I found I was writing something completely different. I had to free myself from academic habits, mm-hmm. the idea of having to footnote every claim you make. Everybody who read it said, don't worry about references or scholarly references. You can just have a thing at the back say, here's for further reading if you care about this. And but the first sentence of the book was, there are two kinds of books you write. Yeah. The ones you write, you want to write, and the ones you have to write. Mm-hmm. And this is the second kind, something I felt I had to write to honor my son and also for myself. If you have a story to tell about your life, I think it's very important not to hold it back. Yeah. Tell your story.
Yeah. I would like to dive deeper into the book, but first, maybe we can introduce to the readers and listeners about schizophrenia, because not many people are familiar with this type of condition. How would you understand or interpret or explain or define this schizophrenia?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, schizophrenia is the most comprehensive and disturbing form of mental illness that the medical profession, psychiatry, recognizes. It's mistakenly thought of as split personality, like you have two sides, but it's more than two. Schizophrenia is about shattering, of feeling like yourself is dispersed into fragments. And the positive symptoms of it, the negative symptoms are simple. It's usually withdrawal, depression, feeling lonely, feeling useless. But there's also a positive symptom in which you are haunted by voices. You can be sitting like we are, and you're hearing a voice talking inside your head. There's also hallucinatory experience, audio hallucinations and visual hallucinations. So one of Gabriel's habits since he was a child was looking into empty space. He was a dreamer, mm-hmm. who could be awake while dreaming. Mm-hmm. And I have many photographs of him as a child. He would sit when he was a little boy, 3 and 4 years old, sit looking out the window of our house into the park across the street, mm-hmm. With his thumb in his mouth and just looking for a long time. And his teachers at school said Gabriel is a dreamer. He was very sweet. He was kind and friendly to other students, but he also had a way of drifting off into contemplating things that nobody else could see. And I don't know much about what it was he was seeing. He wouldn't tell us. He would say,
it's a secret.
Yeah, this was for him. And but we often would go to beautiful places. We live very close to Lake Michigan, which is an infinite lake. You know, you look out and you cannot see the other side. It goes on for hundreds of miles. And he loved to sit by the lake and look out into the distance for much longer than I could. I would get bored and say, okay, let's go do something. And but the schizophrenia makes, nobody really knows what it is. About 1% to 2% of any population will have people who have voices.
Yeah.
And that's the main positive symptom. If you are hearing voices, and especially if they're bad voices, if they're telling you to hurt yourself, or the worst thing they do is they tell you, nobody loves you, you're worthless. It's extremely destructive, hard to deal with. So it is, in part, there is something in the nervous system itself that is complicated. It's also, it can be triggered by stress and trauma. So that, for instance, in minority populations in the U.S., the percentage of schizophrenia in the Black community is higher than in the white community, because the Black community suffers from economic discrimination, hardship, racial prejudice. They're being told constantly that they're, in one way or another, that they're different and inferior, which that's sort of like the external reinforcement of that inner voice that accuses you. So it's a mysterious, there's no cure for it, but it can be managed. And we had hoped it was definitely getting better, because Gabriel was hospitalized, then he got out of the hospital, then he was in a halfway house. Then we found he found a job and began to work as a grocery clerk. He was a produce man. And then he began to be creative. He had always been making drawings. We have a huge number of drawings. And then he got a video camera. We gave him a camera, and he started making films, designing sculptures, and just becoming very creative. After about 10 years it looked as if he was not getting completely better, but a lot better than he had been. So in the second 10 years of the illness, from about age 26, 27, he really became much more self-sufficient and just able to take care of himself. So when he was 38 years old, that's when we didn't realize that inside he was still suffering more than we could tell. And something happened to trigger him to destroy himself.
Yeah. I kind of want to know, what does it mean to kind of be diagnosed as schizophrenic in America? Because I feel like most of my knowledge come from China, and some of my friends, they tell me that they are a little bit afraid to seek mental help because it's still like a stigma. So was it like the same in America?
It is somewhat the same. It's very hard to deny the statistics about the number of people with a mental illness. It's now become almost a joke, for students especially, to say, "So, are you on the spectrum too?" Which is, and of course, the spectrum can go all the way from you're just an ordinary neurotic like everybody else, with anxieties, worries, moods, and two very powerful versions of those. But Gabriel very much felt the stigma. It was funny, though. He tried to convert the stigma into something else. I don't know what to name it, but he said, okay, first he said, the stigma is worse than the symptoms. because people look at you and they immediately classify you.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if an employer or a school learns that you have this diagnosis, it's a label that disqualifies you for some kinds of work. They don't think you'll be able to perform. So he really felt the stigma. But then he tried to turn it around, and he said, I want to affirm schizophrenia. The way he put it was, if I'm going to be crazy, I want to be really good at it.
Yeah.
I want to be the Michael Jordan of crazy.
Whoa.
And so my response was, go for it. So he would, although I said, be a little careful and discreet. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, he would meet somebody, they'd talk for 5 minutes, and he would say to them, well, you realize I have a diagnosis. And they'd say, what? You seem perfectly normal to me. Mm-hmm. He would say, that's because I'm heavily medicated. He would make a joke out of it. But he really, he had a very strong will to transform schizophrenia into something positive. Mm. His way of doing that was to say, these symptoms, hearing voices and seeing things, that's normal. It's just that mine are louder. My voices are louder, and I have to drown them out sometimes, and my visions are clearer. But because he grew up with me as a father, he had read William Blake, who Blake said that his poems were dictated to him by angels or prophets. He described conversations. He said, the prophet Ezekiel came to me the other day, and he said to me, young man, you must work harder, things like that. So he had the example of Blake, who turned seeing and hearing things into the source of inspiration. So he wanted to be an artist like Blake, both an artist of words and images, and take those symptoms and make them into strengths.
So the way he responds to his illness is to make it into artworks and to really make it into inspiration. In this book, there are many drawings and also linked to his videos. So how would you understand these artworks? I've noticed that most of them look not technically trained.
Right.
Yeah. You once told me that Gabe is a self-taught artist.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So could you tell us a bit more about stories behind these artworks?
Well, he loved many different kinds of drawing. He did abstract drawings that look sometimes like Chinese calligraphy, but they are not really letters. They're not characters. But they're improvised abstract sketches. And he also he loved comics. So I think the artwork of comic artists like Art Spiegelman was very inspiring to him. And in the last days of his life, Art Spiegelman came to Chicago for a conference that I organized. And he got to meet Art Spiegelman. Oh. And they shared cigarettes together. And were very, of course, he worshipped Spiegelman. He thought, this is a great artist. And so I think comic strips would have been one direction for him to continue going. He also made a film that was like a parody of one of Bob Dylan's films, in which he rewrote a Dylan song, played it on the guitar, sang to it, and then did the same thing Dylan did with a series of drawings. So every verse there'd be a new drawing, and he would then take the drawing and throw it on the floor. So, but he was what they call an outsider artist. There is a whole kind of industry of interest in that kind of art. The Prinzhorn collection in I think it's in Switzerland. It collected the art of the insane in the early 20th century, and it's not like that it comes automatically with mental illness. Most people it doesn't, but he was one of those exceptional people who could turn his symptoms into artistic expression.
Yeah, I do notice that many of his drawings are quite philosophical, or would you call it meta pictures?
Yeah,
And
you have an example to look at?
Yeah, the door one. The one with the door.
Yes.
Well,
If you
which
can
is your
explain
favorite
that
one?
drawing to me, I've looked at it many times, and I have no idea what it means.
Actually, I would like you to tell us a bit
Okay.
about the drawing first.
Yeah, well, it's a very simple drawing. You're looking at a doorway, and on the door itself, the word love is written. And then there are two frames around love. The inner frame, where the door has hinges on the inner frame, and that frame has cross-hatching, and it's labeled identity. And then there's a second frame around that. It is labeled as harm. So love inside of identity, inside of harm. Maybe, Tuoya, you can tell me what it means. What does it mean to you?
What does it mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like he has options, but also feels like there's no subject that can make the options of realize it. Like he can open the door anytime, the love door.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many things that entraps him, the harm, the identity. And also as I'm looking at the book right now, it's quite a realistic door in the picture, but it's on the book. Like you can't walk into it. So I kind of feel the inability to reach what you actually want to reach. It's a little bit upsetting in that way, but also I think it's hopeful as well. I mean, it's the largest proportion in this canvas. That I believe that love is still the most important thing that he cares about. But you just have to walk through these two steps that seems uncrossable.
Yeah. Well, it's like I think also an image of inside outside.
Yeah.
That love is there inside in the center. It's surrounded by identity, and I think that means his identity. The question, who are you? But then the outer frame is a world of harm. One thing about love that I associate with this, one symptom of schizophrenia, and I've seen it in other cases, is impossible love. You fall in love with someone and you become obsessed. And if they don't love you back, it's tragic. Unrequited love is one of the most painful things in the world. And he suffered from it. When he went to college as a teenager, he fell in love with a girl who lived next door in his dormitory. And we got to know her a bit. She was very sweet. He became infatuated with her. He thought that she was his dream lover, that they were destined to be together. And I think she never realized that. So when we looked at his private papers after his passing, we realized he had never gotten over this impossible love affair. So the door of love was closed to him. And one thing he did that might be related to this, when he was having a panic attack, feeling really terrible, he would get angry, and he would never try to harm anybody, but he would kick the door. He would kick his own door down to his bedroom, and we think, love is just a normal part of human life. Everybody falls in love, but it is extremely painful when you love someone who doesn't love you back.
Have you tried any other ways to kind of fill in this empty part that he's trying to seek?
What do you mean? What kind of other ways?
Like you've mentioned in the book that whenever he needs help, you kind of fly right away to him, jump on a plane, and you try to find him. Is that kind of father-son relationship, is that type of love, does it help him in any way?
I think it did. It kept him alive for, he could have died at age 19. When it first came on, he was having, often with the onset of schizophrenia, it usually happens in late teenage years. And it has a strange effect. You become psychotic. That is, you are filled with delusions. The first symptom that I noticed was when he called me up as a freshman at NYU and said, "Dad, I've discovered the meaning of life." And I said, "Great, what is it? Tell me." And he said, "I need to become homeless." And I said, "Wait a minute, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I've been spending a lot of time here in the park at NYU, Washington Park, very famous gathering place for hippies and beatniks and drug dealers and everything." So, and he said, "I have been hanging out with the homeless, and I realized the homeless are the only people I've met here who are in touch with reality." He says, "The students in the dormitory, they're partying all the time. They're not serious about their classes. Everybody's here to have a good time. The homeless are living in the real world. The students are living in a fantasy world." And I said, "Yeah, well, but it's a fantasy world. It's very difficult and uncomfortable. Being homeless is not a joke. You sleep on a park bench." He said, "Well, I'm taking care of that. I invited one of the men in the park to come and stay in my dorm room with me. But the university doesn't understand this. They told me I can't do that." He was very upset that he couldn't bring a homeless person to live with him. Yeah. So I said, "Well, maybe what you need to do is be like a social worker. They have a great school of social work, and that way you can work with the homeless to help them to find housing like that." No, you don't understand. I need to become homeless myself. I need to be part of it." So I was feeling very anxious about this. And then he said, "Oh, by the way, when I come home for Christmas, could I get a new stereo?" And I said, "Thank heaven." Now, this is normal college student behavior. He still wants his, luxurious student life where things are taken care of. So I said, "Sure, absolutely." And then it passed. But that was really the first moment when I knew something was off. But it's partly also, it's a symptom of the time. I often felt about him that if he'd been born in a different time, say in the 14th century,
Yeah.
Like St. Francis, St. Francis becomes homeless. He says, I have to follow the lead of Christ, which is to give away everything, no property, and go on the road and preach the gospel. So, he wanted, one thing schizophrenia does to you, it makes you an extreme person. Makes you more passionate. If you love somebody, that's it. They must love you back, but that can be tragic. And if you believe something, you believe it thoroughly. Psychosis is often characterized by, as I said, delusional thinking. Grandiosity is part of it. The most famous is, people who believe that they are Napoleon, or they believe that they are the God. God is in me, therefore everything around me, I'm creating it.
Oh, sounds like Trump.
Well, no, actually, I don't think Trump is a psychotic. He is a psychopath.
Okay.
Big difference. His followers have psychosis. They're deluded. He's not deluded. He's got an overinflated ego, and he's a narcissist. He loves himself totally and nobody else, and has no capacity for sympathy with anybody else. The idea of Trump taking in a homeless man or wanting to become homeless, no. Unthinkable. A psychopath also loves to lie. In fact, it's almost as normal as breathing. And it's also a psychopath is incurable. There are famous stories about how a psychopath will behave when they go into therapy. The reason they go into therapy usually is because they've been caught doing something terrible, lying about something, corruption, some kind of evil doing. And when they're caught, and they say, "Oh, it's because he has this psychological problem. He doesn't know the difference between right and wrong." With the insanity defense, my behavior, I'm not responsible for my behavior because I have a mental illness. It's a great excuse. If you ever get caught doing something terrible, saying, "Oh, the devil made me do it. I didn't want to do that." But then when they go into therapy, they are great at conning or bamboozling the therapist. They say, "Oh, doc, I feel so much better. Now you've made it clear and I understand my problem, and of course I'll never do anything like that again. I think I'm cured. You've been a wonderful doctor. You've helped me so much." And it's all a lie. They go out and then they do exactly the same thing. This is Trump. Although he would never do the apology part.
Yeah.
He would just accuse, if somebody said to him, "You realize everything you do shows that you are a psychopath," he would say, "No, you're the psychopath. You're a left-wing radical communist Marxist homosexual."
Sounds like a quite weird combination.
Yeah.
I remember, like you mentioned in the book, you took him to meet a lot of famous people, as like Derrida.
Yes.
I was quite impressed by their encounter. Could you tell us a bit more about their personal relation?
Well, he met Derrida several times. One time, the most fun was when Derrida came to our house for dinner. And before dinner, we were sitting in the living room, and Gabriel said to Jacques, "Jacques, have you ever... you're a philosopher, right?" And Jacques said, "Yes, they call me a philosopher." And he said, "Have you ever seen Monty Python's Philosopher's Soccer Match?" And Jacques said, "No, what's that?" And Gabe said, "Let me show you." So he called it up on the television set. And here it's the ancient philosophers versus the modern philosophers. So on the moderns, Marx, Nietzsche, Kant, Heidegger, Hegel, all of the famous philosophers, most of them German. And the ancient philosophers, of course, it's Socrates and all his colleagues. So, and the ancient philosophers are wearing togas. The modern philosophers are wearing the normal soccer outfits. And then, of course, there's a number of jokes. Marx fouls somebody and he gets a red card. So they watched for a while. And Jacques was laughing uproariously because they made all kinds of jokes about philosophers as soccer players and the moderns and ancients. So Gabe says, so who do you side with? And Jacques said, the ancients, of course, which is funny because, you think, oh, philosophy must progress so that modern philosophy is better than ancient philosophy. Ancient philosophy was naive and simple-minded compared to the sophistication of the moderns. And Jacques, of course, his writing was totally immersed in modern philosophy. But in some ways, I think Gabe got him to reveal his true instinct as a philosopher, which was philosophy must always start over. And it needs to start over with the ancients, with all these basic questions. What is truth? What is goodness? What is beauty? So Jacques enjoyed it very thoroughly. And when we visited them in Paris, it was like, he said, here's the young man who revealed to me I was an ancient philosopher. I should have lived 3 centuries ago.
Yeah. So Gabe is quite an inspiration.
Yes, he could
Derrida.
be.
Yeah. I've also noticed that in the book, many of your family members have dedicated their memories to Gabe in numerous ways. You wrote a book, and there are also poems, and also a film being made. Could you tell us a bit more about these other efforts?
Yeah, Gabe's mother wrote poems immediately after his passing, so they are part of the book. Maybe I'll read one.
Yeah.
Okay, this is about 1 week after he passed, June 27th, 2012. June 20th was the day that he left us. How can you be gone when all around you swirls the love for you and from you? How can you be gone when yet we see your sculptures, drawings, photos, films, and videos, read your screenplays, hear your songs? When we see you in our mind's eye, walking floppy hat and baggy pants and backpack, cigarette, quiet, staring, thinking, do we know what you are hearing, what your mind wants you to follow? Why it pushes you from all who love you, want to love you, hold you in their hearts? You are gone, you are gone, you are gone, you are, you are, you are. You exist now in another form, a form we make of memory, writings, visions, objects. We will not have your humor, your embrace, concern for others, your moods, your anger, your painful accusations, your beauty, your playfulness, your energies, your joy, your helpfulness, your growth, your ever new abilities. You are gone, you are gone, you are gone. You are with us. You are with us still. You are with us still in silence, in memory, in works, in deeds, in love. So let me stop there.
Yeah, thank you.
Janice is a poet and a composer and a musician. She plays flute and makes very contemporary music.
And your daughter is making a film.
Yes, she's making a full-length biopic documentary about him and his artwork. It's called Gabriel's Back Pages, which is based on actually a Bob Dylan song called My Back Pages. And Gabriel had his own version. He made a film script called My Back Pages. So it's building on his idea. In fact, it started not as a film about him, but a film by him that he was going to make with his sister, Carmen. So they had planned this film together, and the understanding was it would be a family film. My wife, Janice, would provide the music. Carmen would be the co-director with Gabriel, and I was assigned the job of image researcher because it was going to be a huge master film about the history of madness. Gabriel had been part of a group. We had been watching Godard's great masterpiece, his 9-hour film, the Histoire du Cinéma, a film about history as seen through cinema, represented by it, and also the history of cinema. So he said, I want to do the Histoire de la Folie, the history of madness, to make sense of what this whole long, the obsession of humanity with its own tendency to go crazy, to do irrational things, or terribly terrible things in the name of reason sometimes. So that's what launched me on the book I'm just finishing. It took a long time. It was interrupted by writing this memoir, and now I'm trying to bring it to an end. But it's an attempt. It's not going to be like that that film that he imagined, but it will attempt to look at madness as something essential to the human condition, not just something that sets you apart, but something that is built in. I say one of the claims of the book is that mental disorder is not a bug in human consciousness. It's a feature. The confusion, delusion, the adoption of fantastic beliefs, that's what our big brains are designed to do. It's why we are a dreaming species. We have multiple levels of consciousness. So he wanted to transform, as he said, schizophrenia from an illness that sets you apart, as, oh, you're sick and I'm healthy, to a different paradigm. We are all afloat in a ship of fools. None of us is perfectly healthy and rational.
And you have worked as an iconologist for most of your life. How does Gabe kind of change your focus in writing or in reflecting on anything? Your new book is coming out, right? It's called Seeing Through Madness.
Yes.
So how's this book different from any of other books you've written about?
Well, it's not totally different because it builds on a lot of previous scholarship, particularly about pictures of the mad, images and descriptions of mad people and their behavior, and the treatment of the insane. In my lecture tomorrow, I'm going to show or try to answer the question, what is it about madness that makes it, if it's in everyday life, it makes people want to turn away. They don't want to see it. They don't want to deal with it in real life. It's something they have an aversion to. When you put it into art, particularly drama, opera, cinema, suddenly it becomes a spectacle of madness, and people love to see that. It's okay in representation, but not in reality. And that's one of the things this essay will explore. Why do we love to see and hear madness in the arts, but not in real life? I don't have a real answer to that, except I think art gives us enough distance so we feel safe. It's like the aesthetics of the sublime, in which you look at a dangerous, skydiving.
Yeah.
skydiving is a crazy thing to do.
I love
right?
skydiving.
I know you do.
It's not crazy.
It depends on who you're talking to.
Oh, yeah.
Does your mother think it's not crazy?
I'm sure that like a tiny part like in her is must be, I'm not going to deal with this kid anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So skydiving is a perfect example of sublime experience. It's why mountain climbing,
Okay.
mountain climbing puts you in danger. Surfing, all of these things, those are activities where you come close to danger, but you don't want to be hurt. And it's another thing about our species that we love risk as long as it's not too much. We like to come to the edge. And the arts bring us to the edge. Real life may go over the edge. And so I like looking at the video of you jumping out of a plane, but I don't know if I would, if I was really there, I probably would have said, no, don't do it.
Why?
Well, I don't know. Maybe I would do it too. I think because it looked like incredible fun.
Yeah.
Especially when you're halfway down and you're flying and able to take in the experience. I thought, I want to be there.
Actually, like, I proposed the option to many of my classmates. I want to take some friends with me to do the skydiving, and all of them think that I was mad. Which, yeah, kind of true, but it's like a leap of faith. Playing out of 15,000 feet.
It's very literally a leap of faith.
Yeah, it is, but it allows you to see so much more of the planet Earth. When you're above the clouds, everything seems so much larger. You don't care about so many things anymore.
Yeah.
In the way that you are preoccupied with everything insignificant. Where are we now? What are we talking about? I'm a little bit lost.
We're talking about
skydiving.
Skydiving. We got to there from why people like to see madness in the arts.
Oh, yeah.
But they are afraid of it, or they turn away from it in real life. They say, oh, that's terrible. That's awful. Yeah. So, and the aesthetics of the sublime.
Yeah. Oh, can I ask you something else?
Yeah.
Like, if in this book, you've mentioned a lot of your experience as a scholar, working in different schools, different departments, doing visiting scholarships, while making conferences, and other of these professional things. And you still keep this passion, can I say it, like a childlike curiosity to anything, which is, to me, very incredible, because I seldom do I see scholars like with such like a curious mind. And how do you deal with that? Like, how do you combat the boredom and the kind of the tedious routines of scholarship and still be such alive, such kicking around like?
I don't think I deal with them that well.
Really?
Because I'm very easily bored, and right now I am editing my book. It's 414 pages of manuscript, and it's I made the mistake of having a copy editor go through to make corrections, and she was very over aggressive and made too many corrections. So I am having to work through my own writing and clean up what has been done to it. And so I have to go back and look at my original, say, and then compare it and say, no, I don't want these corrections. What I really wanted her to do was take care of misspelling and spacing and punctuation errors, or maybe capitalization. Instead, she got very aggressive. So when I hate working on the manuscript now, even though I'm very fond of the ideas in the book. This is a moment when I'm always trying to think of something else to do rather than finish the editing. Cleaning up messes. It's like not very much fun. Yeah, well, and some people are very good at that. They, I'm very jealous of scholars who when they hand you a manuscript, every footnote is correct. It includes the page numbers of the quotation, the place of publication. They know if they have an illustration, they've already provided information about how to get permission for that illustration. So they're very careful. But when I'm writing, I quote somebody and I might be quoting it from memory. And I think I should check this right now. But I say, but I don't want to interrupt the writing to go check this. And then I forget. And then a month later, I go back and I have to check that. Now, where was that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, but how you maintain optimism and happiness. It's I think one thing is just good luck. I have had when I was a child, I was very sickly, and everybody thought I would die very young. My father died young, and I didn't expect to live long. But one thing makes me happy now. I have lived a long time, and I'm still okay.
You seem younger than me. Okay.
No, I don't. But so I feel like somehow nature was kind to me because all my childhood illnesses went away. I spent a year in the hospital when I was 8 years old, and they thought I would that I might die of heart failure. That's one reason to be happy, is to appreciate your good luck when you have it.
I vaguely remembered that although you are a professor in English literature and art history, you said like you were studying mathematics as an undergrad. Like how did you make the choice to switch to English literature and art history?
Yeah, it was very strange. I went to Michigan State University, which at the time had one of the best programs in mathematics in the whole country, because one of the deans had received a big federal grant to build the mathematics program. So they recruited students from all over North America and from abroad. So in my generation, and this is 1960, early 60s. And so this whole cohort of students arrived in my freshman class, and we were all there to study mathematics. The reason I wanted to be part of that was I had a great teacher in high school who made me fall in love with math. I thought it was the only pure knowledge. Every other bit of knowledge, history, art, literature, that's all, it's a reflection of the confusion of human life. But mathematics is about certainty, about clarity, about everything. Like a proof in mathematics, there can't be any mistakes. It has to be completely logical. And my math teacher had a wonderful approach to it. He said he wanted us to reinvent mathematics. He made it an assignment to start over and build our own geometry and all that. So I felt like when I arrived at college, I thought, I'm part of the avant-garde. We are going to break open the universe. We're going to understand everything, and we'll be able to, things like physics will be somehow transformed by our work. And then the first year was very exciting. Second year began to be hard, and I realized the cohort of math students, that many of them were extremely gifted. It was like going to play basketball and realizing everybody around you can jump higher, run faster, and they're more skilled, and everything that you do takes an effort. Everything they do, it seems to be effortless. So I started feeling, maybe I'm not that good at this. And the truth was, I was just average or pretty good. I'd fallen in love with the wrong thing. But fortunately, and when I had announced to my fellow math students, I'm switching to English, they said, "Oh, why would you do that?"
Yeah, I would say the same thing as English major. I would say the
Says,
same.
it's not important, really. Mathematics is about the truth, about certainty, clarity and reason, and beauty. That's one thing people don't understand, I think, is mathematicians are crazy.
Okay.
I'll talk about this on Friday in the
great.
the talk on the infinite. How crazy the idea of infinity, it makes mathematicians crazy because they have to deal with it. It's a concept. Did you know that there's more than one kind of infinity?
I'm not aware.
Okay, there are natural numbers and real numbers. This is the most famous example. Natural numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4. There's an infinite number. You can keep on counting. They're countless. But then there are real numbers. And that's not 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.01, 1.02, the decimals and the fractions. So those are infinite also, but it's a bigger infinity. So there are scales of infinity. Some are small infinities, some are big, and some are in between. So it's
yeah, I'm a little bit dizzy.
yeah, right away you say, okay.
So then you switched to English Lit.
I switched, and that was also provoked by a great teacher. I had a professor who had a kind of romantic name. Hazard Adams was his name. Very, I don't know. I've never met anybody else called Hazard. I'm a dangerous person. And he was very handsome. And of course, all of the girls in the class adored Hazard Adams. But he brought in the illuminated books of William Blake to our class and passed them around. And I opened up, I think it was Blake's Book of Urizen, and I saw these amazing images and this poetry that was like from another planet. And I said, I have to study this. This really intrigues me. I think partly because it was, Blake was one of these universal poets, a cosmic poet who wrote about, he was trying to create a modern myth of a whole new way of thinking, sweet science, which we talked about last night, visionary forms, dramatic. And he probably had a mild case of schizophrenia. In any rate, he was one of those poets who feels like the words are coming to him. They're being dictated to him. He often said, I took down these lines from dictation. The spirits visited me, and I sat down and wrote the words down that they told me to write. And then the images were visions that he had. He had what's called an eidetic imagination. So if you close your eyes and you try to imagine something, you see it quite vividly. He said that's the measure of a true artist. Do they really see what they are drawing or painting? So I then went on to graduate school. After I left Michigan State, I got my a double major. I finished the mathematics major, but then I got the major in English as well. And went to Johns Hopkins for graduate school, where I knew when I arrived, I'm going to write a dissertation on William Blake, and it's going to be about the words and images and their relationship, which is another piece of good luck, because it's hard to decide. You need to be inspired, and I was lucky there.
So, when does the fascination with art history kick in?
Well, right away, because Blake was a visual artist. So I realized, now that I'm here, I have to read visual arts, even though I'm in an English department. So I was very lucky at Johns Hopkins. There was a strong art history department as well. So I went to see professors there, told them that I was writing about a poet painter. I knew that I wanted to study this, but I didn't have the tools. So in graduate school, I really did a double discipline in art history and literature.
Your background really kind of gives you a lot of inspiration of how literature is always linked to art.
Yes.
So when you go to teaching, how do you react to this split between literature and art? Because I suppose you have to teach a lot of materials that are not related to art history.
Yes. And some of them are, as I developed, I started to read philosophy as well. And that philosophy became the kind of middle ground for thinking about the problem as you're describing it. Here's literature, the art of words. Here's visual arts, the art of images. How can we think about their relationship? And of course, there's a sort of normal answer to that question, which is the visual is an illustration of the verbal. The picture is there to be an ornament or a kind of clarification, an illustration of what the words say. But I thought, is that the only thing to say about it? Is that all there is? And reading Blake, I realized, no, that his images were not illustrations. They were in some way independent. It's like the words were on one channel, the images were on another. They, of course, were coming out of the same mind, very connected. So you could see them as illustrations, but I felt there was something more. And that's what led me to try to think through more philosophically about the relation of words and images. And that feeling has become, over the years, even more pronounced, because those two modalities of representation, what you might call the symbolic and the iconic, or the digital analog, it's everywhere. It's part of our consciousness. It's maybe encoded in our brains, that we have left and right brains and hemispheres. And so we are constructed to both imagine and articulate, to create language, but also to create pictures. And that's really all knowledge is. It's a combination of discourse and representation.
So philosophy is the third element that you're seeking.
Yeah.
Triangulation.
Yeah. That's why, iconology is the product of that.
So when you're teaching in the University of Chicago, you kind of started the journal, Critical Inquiry, and you are the editor for 40 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, like, I remember I read it somewhere that one of your policies to always bring on the young and the new.
Yeah.
I really love that, because I'm the young.
You're young and you're new. Yes.
Yeah. I hope I am new, but so how does it feel like to be the editor of Critical Inquiry?
I loved it. It was very hard work, but I was very excited by it, and it was, again, it was just dumb luck that I got to do this. I arrived at University of Chicago, and I went out to lunch with the editor. I wasn't the founder. A man named Sheldon Sachs was the founder in 1974. So I arrived in 1977. He has launched the journal. It's already kind of made a splash because it was the age of theory. Everybody was thinking, we have to transform the world, and we need good theories for that. So he was a very senior professor. He took me to lunch and said, "So, what do you think about critical inquiry?" And I said, "I read every issue." And I organized a group at my previous university where we would read each issue together and have a discussion. And he said, "I want you to be a co-editor."
How old was you?
Let's see, I would have been 30,
It's an early career.
35, yeah. And then it turned Shelley, who's a wonderful, kind of dynamic, charismatic scholar. He also very heavy smoker, chain smoker. You don't see people like that much anymore. Very verbal and clever, but it had hurt his heart. And within a year of that, he died. And the rest of the editorial board, I was the youngest person. Everybody else on the editorial board, there was just two other people. And I said, "Tom, will you be the editor?" And I said, "Yes." So, yeah, and I did it then for 40 years. So it was hard work. But it was great fun to feel like all of this new thinking was coming. I mean, this is the age when Derrida's writing. I had met Derrida when I was in graduate school at Johns Hopkins, but Fred Jameson, the great Marxist critic, Derrida, Richard Rorty, who I mentioned last night, and in the world of literary criticism and art criticism, the age of theory had arrived, and critical inquiry was one of the major voices for this movement to create new theory. I always remember Fred Jameson's definition of theory. He said, it's like philosophy, but with less abstraction. Theory is philosophy that's aware of its own medium. And yeah, that stuck with me as a kind of a definition of the difference between theory and philosophy. And that's why I think of iconology as very much embodied theory. You let the pictures help you theorize. You don't come to pictures with your theory already figured out. You look at the pictures and let the theory emerge.
Was it very difficult at the start of the journal to really make something new?
Actually, it wasn't so difficult because, well, for one thing, everybody wanted to publish in critical inquiry. It was, if you published an article with us, it was a very good thing for your tenure and promotion. So we received thousands of submissions. So we had a lot of things to pick. And I also felt we didn't just want to have academic scholars, contributors. So I designed a special kind of section of the journal called Artists on Art. So we would invite artists to write about art. I know some of my colleagues said, but artists, they're not that smart. They can't. They often can't write that well. Things like that. No, they write differently. They don't write with footnotes. They're not trying to prove an argument. It's a different kind of writing, and if if the art is good and interesting, let's see how the writing is, and we'll judge it as writing. So we once had a conference on narrative, which became a special issue, and we brought all of the narrative theorists, people like Hayden White, who wrote a book called Meta History, and Seymour Chapman, many other. I mean, these were the names of the leaders in the field of narrative theory. What is the theory of storytelling? What are the parts of stories? But I thought, let's have a novelist. And my favorite novelist at the time was a woman named Ursula Le Guin. Have you ever heard of her?
Sci-fi.
Yeah.
I know. I read her.
Yeah. I had read all her novels. And so I invited her to come, and she said, but this will be very strange. I will be like an insect among the entomologists, I said, yes, but
you're a very good sample.
Yeah. I said, you will be the insect that gets to talk and talk back to the entomologists.
This is so fun.
Yeah, and so she came. She was a wonderful person, very tiny woman. And I thought, these big stories come out of this little woman. It's so so amazing. She imagines worlds, and so she arrived. I said, "So what is your paper going to be about?" And she said, "I haven't written it, but you are our last speaker. You're going to wind up the conference." She says, "I will listen to the entomologists, and then the insect will buzz and make noise." So she did. She while she would stay up all night, and she wrote a paper. It was called "The Purpose of Stories," or "Why Are We Huddled Around the Campfire?" And she said the reason we tell stories is because we're gathered at the campfire and the darkness is closing in. So we tell stories to. He said the first reason is to put our children to sleep and give them good dreams, and then maybe we get something extra for ourselves.
How did the series respond? Are they shocked?
I think they were shocked. They didn't know. It was so wonderful, though, to have a brilliant, masterful storyteller in the midst of these narrative theorists who are all talking about, well, there is, the structure of the action and the situation and the temporality of narrative and the past-present dialectics and so forth. She comes in with it was basically a meta story about the question of, why we tell stories. We said why I tell stories.
Because I have a confusion as a student. Like, sometimes I feel like the knowledge I learn is so professionalized. It's a little bit detached, especially for literature. I feel like the case in China is a little bit different from English-speaking countries because we're a little bit far away from the literary market where everything is happening. So we read more about classics and contemporaries, and we get information online, and it's a little bit difficult to read the hard copy of the book. Sometimes I feel like I'm just lying about what I'm reading just to make them appear reasonable. Well, the materials themselves are quite sufficient and doesn't need to be reasoned. So have you ever had like students to have this type of talk with you to say that I feel not so sure about literary criticism?
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's a leap of faith.
Okay.
To study literature. Why does literature even need to be studied? Just read. Why should we write about it?
Yeah.
I have a wonderful colleague named Wayne Booth, who was a master literary critic. He wrote beautifully himself. But and then another, J. Hillis Miller, who was one of my dissertation advisors. And Hillis Miller wrote one of the most famous essays that we ever published. You should look it up. It's the title is "The Critic as Host," and it's an explanation of literary criticism that he said it transforms the critic from a parasite into a host. And it was a reversal of the position of the critic. We think, oh, well, the real thing is the novel or the poem. That's the important object. And what we're doing is a commentary. It's sort of a parasite on the original thing. Well, Hillis said, no, let's turn the tables and think of ourselves as being a host for the literary text. We take it into ourselves. We give it a home in our thinking. And it turned literary criticism upside down. Very influential essay. And I think it was more downloaded than any essay we ever published. Just because it addressed your question.
I'll read it.
Yeah.
And as your first lecture last night talked about the relation between the history of images and the theory of images, I just have a very generalized question about how would you respond to the historians who is like accusing you of being too abstract?
I don't know. I would have to hear what the specific objection is. Do you think I was being too abstract last night?
No, you're not. But I would imagine a lot of historians wouldn't agree with the approach of making imaginative linkages free-flowing everywhere with all type of images from all times and all references, all cultures.
Yeah. I know there are some, especially art historians, are more conservative. At least they used to be. When I wrote The Pictorial Turn, it said, we need to go beyond art history and understand that, every linguists have known for a long time that when you read literature, you also need to study the language itself. So when you look at paintings or photographs or sculpture, the visual arts, you need to look at vision itself, and you need to look at the way we see form, and what our visual experiences do to us, how they are constructed. Well, it's not enough just to say, here's a picture by Poussin. It was painted in 1637, and here is the story that it illustrates. See, I was trying to get over illustration as, so that, and I've said, you're not really looking at the painting. You're turning the painting into a story. So go read the story. Why do you need the painting?
Yeah.
And that's why I think Poussin is such a master. He takes the story of the golden calf, and I think he turns it upside down. Completely reverses it. He makes Moses a minor character, Moses with his tablets of the law against images.
Yeah. I remember like last time you were in Peking University, you gave a lecture in Professor Powers' course that you mentioned that some of the art historians are more textual oriented than literary critics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really obey the text. They believe, you need to know the artist's biography. You need to place it in their life, and you need to see what their picture is about, and the answer to that is found in words. And I wanted to say, no, the answer to what they're doing is you've got to look. One of the professors at Johns Hopkins, who was my mentor, was a man named Joshua Taylor. And Joshua Taylor wrote a wonderful little book, I think probably forgotten by now. It's just called Learning to Look.
Yeah, you recommended it to me before.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and it's a very straightforward book. It's not big theory, but it's saying, how do you really look at a picture? Some people look at, and you look at it for a glance, say, oh, well, that's a picture of a pipe. Yeah, fine, okay. But then you look at it and says, no, wait, why does it say this is not a pipe? When Foucault really knew how to look at things, he looked at it and said, okay, of course I know it's not a pipe, but why does he have to say that it's not a pipe? And then the theory begins to spin out from it, all based on what he sees this picture doing. As he says, subverting all of the normal relations of classification, denomination. It's a picture that, as you look at it, the longer you look at it, the more it makes you think.
I really love your class, although I've only heard several of them. I feel like you are the type of professor that really inspires students and really passionate about teaching. But like the condition we're dealing with now is more like publication oriented, and everyone is more agitated about going faster, having more. And I'm not sure about the condition in America, but I feel like what I've seen is that a lot less effort are put in class because like everybody is under a greater pressure now. So as a scholar who have seen all and have been everywhere, how would you address this condition?
Well, there is, as I said, in my time, publish or perish was very much so. Professors are often very much under pressure to meet deadlines. The first job offer I had, it was at NYU, and they said, we'll offer you the job, but if your dissertation is not turned into a book 3 years from now and being reviewed positively, there will be no possibility of promotion. And I said, well, then I'm going to turn down your job offer because that's impossible conditions. Why would I want to put myself under that kind of stress to crank out? My first book, of course, was on Blake. I had
Blake's composite art.
Yeah. And I had written, that was my dissertation. And I got my dissertation finished and delivered it to the dissertation office at Johns Hopkins 5 minutes before the deadline, when it would have been rejected. I would not get my degree and would not get my job, So I hate deadlines like that.
Me too.
But it's the real world.
Yeah.
What can I say? The key, I've always thought the classroom, though, was kind of a sacred space where you try to treat your students as human beings with, their flaws, shortcomings, and also their talents. And it's partly selfish. I want my classroom to be a place where I'm learning something. The idea that you just go in and you say, okay, here's the way things are, and here's, I'm telling you everything, please copy it down carefully and remember it and give it back to me in your papers or exams. That model of teaching has never excited me. I'd rather come in with a question, the Socratic method, and maybe get an argument going. When I taught here in China in 1988, I had that wonderful experience of teaching Mary Wollstonecraft to 20 English majors at Beijing Foreign Studies, the Foreign Languages University here. And the day we were doing Mary Wollstonecraft, I said, I'm going to try to provoke something here. I said, Wollstonecraft talks about vindicating the rights of women who were treated as second-class people. But I understand that here in China, there is total equality. That's the communist philosophy. Everyone is equal, and so women must be equal to men. So Wollstonecraft must feel like kind of, nothing new for you. And I could see right away the women in the class all looked at each other and said, "Professor Mitchell, we have to explain something to you about Chinese men."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very funny. And the men in the class tried to defend themselves a little bit, and they basically told the men, "Shut up, we're going to tell the truth to you."
Yeah. So we actually had a debate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's another technique I would often do. I'd say, I want you to take sides on some question. And I can't think of an example offhand, but the idea of dividing your class in two, and especially when I found is the side that everybody thinks is the stronger, the people who take the weak side often have much more fun. Because they know they have to really make an argument. The other side, they think, well, everybody already agrees with me, so I don't have to put any work into it.
So if you are to give any advice to young students or young scholars, what would it be?
Something really corny, like follow your heart. Try to find, if you're talking about literature, find what you love, find a question that intrigues you, and you want to answer it or reflect on it in depth. For me, the question was, what is the relation of words and images? That was, you saw that came up last night at the end of the discussion.
Yeah.
And it's why we had the little discussion about comparativism. And of course, it's very powerful in comparative literature. But I always felt comparison, there's a proverb, comparisons are odious. Comparisons are hateful. There's something that bothers me about the idea of, I'm going to compare this with that. It's not that it's useless, but I want to, it makes you think that the important thing is the comparison, when why not ask, what's the relation of these two things? If it's a non-relation, that there is no connection. So I want to be more empirical and not assume beforehand that the point is to compare A and B.
I feel like comparison forces you to make a judgment, puts you in a higher position where you're not at.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We've talked a lot. I've had a great time. I hope people will read our book, Mental Traveler, especially for Chinese readers. The translation will be out very quick. So
how quick? This is a question for you.
Yeah, I would. I'm just really I really want to make this book in the right way.
Yeah.
Perhaps at the end of this year or next year. Yeah, I think it's next year.
Yeah, it'd be great if it could be out by next spring, because that's when the book on madness will come out, and also my daughter's film.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
So people can watch the film as well.
Yeah.
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 So thank you, Professor Mitchell, for being with me.
Thank you, Tuoya. It's a pleasure to talk to you always.
It's a pleasure to talk to you.